No one could understand why the bull kept crying at the same grave until the farmer decided to dig. What he found there shocked the whole town and revealed a secret hidden for years. Watch until the end and get ready for the truth. If you love stories that surprise you, subscribe to the channel and don't miss what's coming next. The vast expanse of the Montana sky stretched endlessly above Whispering Pines Ranch. Its brilliant blue, a stark contrast to the golden grasslands that rolled toward the distant mountains. Ethan Miller wiped the sweat from his brow as he leaned against the weathered fence post, his calloused hands bearing testament to 30 years of ranching life. At 53, with salt and pepper hair and deep crow's feet marking his weathered face, he embodied the stoic resilience of Montana ranchers. "That's the third Sunday in a row," Jake Thompson said, coming to stand beside his boss. The ranch and was pushing 70, but moved with the vigor of a man 20 years younger. He pointed toward the large black bull, walking with deliberate steps across the eastern pasture. "Just coincidence," Ethan replied, though uncertainty tinged his voice. "Thunder's probably just restless." Jake shook his head, the gesture stirring his gray beard. "Ain't nothing just about it, boss. That bull's got somewhere to be every Sunday, like he's keeping an appointment." Ethan's brow furrowed as he watched. Thunder, the most impressive bull on his ranch, ambled toward the property line with purpose in his stride. The animal had always been exceptional, massive yet gentle, with an intelligence that sometimes unsettled the ranch hands. But this new behavior had started about a month ago and showed no signs of stopping. "Where exactly does he go?" Ethan asked, though he suspected Jake had already tracked the bull's mysterious journey. "Old Pinecrest Cemetery," Jake answered, confirming Ethan's suspicions. "Stands there for near an hour, then comes back on his own. Never tries to run off. Never bothers nobody." The mention of the small, forgotten cemetery at the edge of his property sent an uncomfortable chill down Ethan's spine. Most locals had forgotten it existed, a relic from the town's early days, when Whispering Pines was just a collection of homesteads and ambitious dreams. "Bulls don't make social calls, Jake," Ethan replied dryly. "There must be something drawing him there, maybe some particular grass or plants he likes." "If that's what helps you sleep at night, boss," Jake chuckled, his weathered face crinkling with amusement. "But I been ranching longer than you been alive, and I ain't never seen no bull with a standing date at no graveyard." As the conversation ended, Ethan's daughter Olivia approached, her auburn hair catching the late afternoon sun. At 27, she had returned to the ranch after completing her veterinary studies at Montana State University, bringing modern ideas to the traditional operation. "Dad, is Thunder wandering off again?" she asked, following their gaze to the distant black figure, now barely visible at the edge of the property. "Your father thinks he's gone grazing for cemetery weeds," Jake teased, earning a sharp look from Ethan. Olivia's expression turned serious. "Animals have deeper emotional lives than we give them credit for, Dad. There's a growing body of research on grief and memory in livestock. It's not just primates and elephants anymore." Ethan waved her off. "Next you'll be telling me he's out." They're reciting bull poetry. The deflection came easily, but something about Thunder's behavior had gotten under his skin. There was a disturbing precision to it. Every Sunday, same time, same destination, same duration. Like clockwork, like ritual. "Whatever it is," Olivia continued undeterred, "it's worth looking into. Thunder's our prized breeding bull. If something's affecting him, we should know about it." That evening, as the Montana sunset painted the sky in blazing orange and deep purple, Ethan sat on his porch with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The ranch house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the old wooden structure settling. His mind kept returning to Thunder, now safely back in the pasture with the rest of the herd, as if the afternoon excursion had never happened. The bull had come to Whispering Pines Ranch as a calf 15 years ago, Ethan recalled. There was Something different about him even then, a calmness, an attentiveness that stood out. Over the years, he had grown into an impressive specimen, with a muscular frame that dwarfed the other bulls, and a temperament that made him surprisingly manageable despite his size. Sleep came fitfully that night, with dreams of dark shapes, moving across distant fields, and the sound of hooves on dry earth. By morning, Ethan had made up his mind. "I'm going to follow him next Sunday," he announced at breakfast, cutting off Olivia mid-sentence as she discussed vaccination. "Schedules." She paused, fork halfway to her mouth. "Thunder? I need to see for myself what he's doing out there," Ethan said, trying to sound casual despite the intensity of his curiosity. The week crawled by with the tedious rhythm of ranch life, fixing fences, checking cattle, managing the business end of a medium-sized beef operation, struggling to stay competitive in changing times. Ethan found himself watching Thunder more closely during his daily rounds, looking for any clue to explain the bull's unusual behavior. The animal seemed normal all week, interacting with the herd and responding to handlers, as he always had. When Sunday finally arrived, Ethan felt an unexpected nervousness as the afternoon approached. He positioned himself strategically behind a copse of pines where he could observe without being seen. Sure enough, as the sun began its westward descent, Thunder separated himself from the herd. With methodical steps, he approached the fence line where a gap had been deliberately left open, a test Ethan had arranged, curious whether Thunder would take advantage of a broader escape route. The bull paused at the opening, massive head swinging left to right as if checking for observers. Then, with surprising delicacy for an animal of his size, he stepped through and continued his journey across the adjacent field toward the small copse of trees that concealed the cemetery. Ethan followed at a distance, crouched low and moving carefully to avoid alerting the bull to his presence. The cemetery came into view, a small, neglected plot of land, enclosed by a rusted iron fence, most of its stones tilting at odd angles, weathered by decades of Montana winters and summers. From his hiding spot behind a large oak, Ethan watched. As Thunder approached the cemetery gate, nudged it open with his nose, and entered with a reverence that seemed impossible for a mere animal. What happened next rooted Ethan to the spot, disbelief warring with the undeniable evidence before his eyes. The massive bull moved with purpose through the overgrown grass and weeds, navigating between headstones until he reached a grave in the far corner, partially hidden by the shadows of an ancient elm. There, Thunder lowered his great head, then gradually folded his legs beneath him until he lay directly on the grave, his breathing slow and deliberate. Ethan could scarcely believe what he was seeing. The bull's normally impassive eyes appeared to glisten in the late afternoon light, though Ethan told himself it must be a trick of the sun. Thunder remained motionless except for the rise and fall of his massive chest, as if in silent communion with whoever lay beneath the earth. "What in God's name?" Ethan whispered to himself, the words barely audible even in the profound silence that surrounded the cemetery. A shiver ran through him that had nothing to do with the cooling evening air, for in that moment, watching this wordless ritual unfold, Ethan Miller confronted something beyond his understanding, something that challenged everything he thought. He knew about the creatures that shared his life and land. He needed to know who was buried in that grave. Monday morning arrived with a clarity that made the previous day's events seem dreamlike. Ethan sat at his desk, coffee mug clenched in one hand, staring unseeing at the ranch account spread before him. The image of Thunder lying on that grave wouldn't leave him. It haunted the edges of his consciousness like a photograph slightly out of focus. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Olivia remarked, entering the office with a stack of veterinary reports. She paused, studying her father's expression. "Did something happen with Thunder yesterday?" Ethan hesitated. His daughter was scientifically minded, pragmatic despite her openness to new research. Would she believe what he had witnessed, or would she dismiss it as the fanciful interpretation of an aging rancher? I followed him to the cemetery, he finally admitted. He visited a specific grave, laid down on it like he was mourning. Instead of the skepticism he expected, Olivia's eyes widened with fascination. "That's extraordinary," she breathed, setting down her papers and pulling up a chair. "Which grave?" "Far corner, under the elm. Couldn't make out the name from where I was." He paused. "Olivia, the way he acted, it wasn't normal animal behavior, it was deliberate, almost human." "I need to see this," she said immediately. "Next Sunday." "No," Ethan interrupted, surprising himself with his vehemence. "No, I need to figure this out first. There's something personal about it. I can't explain it, but watching felt like intruding on something private." Olivia studied him, her head tilted slightly. "Okay, Dad, but whatever's happening, it clearly matters to you. Don't shut me out." After she left, Ethan sat in silence for several minutes before reaching for his phone. A few calls later, he had the number for the county records office. The woman who answered sounded bored until he mentioned Pinecrest Cemetery. "That old place?" Her voice perked up. "It's been closed to new burials for decades. Historical Society tried to get funding to restore it a few years back, but the proposal stalled." "Why the interest?" "Just trying to identify a specific grave," Ethan replied vaguely. "Would your office have burial records?" "For Pinecrest? Maybe partial ones. Most burned in the courthouse fire of '67. You might have better luck with Ruth Carson at the Historical Society. She's been documenting the old cemeteries for some personal project." Ruth Carson proved to be a sprightly 82-year-old with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She invited Ethan into her small house filled with books, photographs, and carefully organized file boxes. The smell of apple pie lingered in the air. "Pinecrest Cemetery," she repeated after he explained his request. "Not many folks remember it anymore. Used to be the main burial ground before Whispering Pines expanded and they established Oak Meadows Cemetery closer to town." She pulled out a detailed hand-drawn map. "Now, where exactly is this grave you're asking about?" When Ethan described the location, Ruth nodded thoughtfully. "That section was primarily used in the late 90s through early 2000s, just before they officially closed the cemetery. Not many burials during that period." She flipped through a binder. "If you could give me a few days, I might be able to narrow it down for you." Returning to the ranch, Ethan found himself driving past the cemetery turnoff. Almost without conscious decision, he pulled over and walked the short path to the rusted gate. In daylight, without the mystical quality of the previous evening's encounter, the place looked merely sad, abandoned, overgrown, forgotten. He made his way carefully to the grave Thunder had visited. Up close, he could see that it was more neglected than most, nearly swallowed by tall grass and wild Montana asters. Kneeling, Ethan began clearing away the vegetation with his hands, revealing a simple headstone, its inscription weathered but still legible. Sarah Jane Wilson, 1965-2005. Her kindness spoke louder than words. The name struck a distant chord in Ethan's memory. Wilson. Had he known a Wilson who worked on the ranch? The turnover among seasonal hands was high, faces and names blending together across the years. But something about Sarah Jane Wilson tugged at him, a memory just beyond his grasp. He took a photo of the headstone with his phone and stood, brushing dirt from his jeans. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. A small, weathered, wooden cross a few feet from the main stone, the kind often used as a temporary marker before a permanent headstone is placed. It had nearly rotted away, but when Ethan stooped to examine it, he could make out faded letters spelling Aurora. Puzzled, he added this detail to his growing collection of questions. Back at the ranch, he retreated to the storage room where, Decades of ranch records were kept in dusty boxes and filing cabinets. Hours passed as he searched through employee files from the early 2000s, finding nothing for Sarah Wilson. Just as frustration began to set in, Jake knocked on the doorframe. "Looking for something specific, boss?" the old ranch hand asked, eyeing the mess of papers surrounding Ethan. "Sarah Jane Wilson. Name mean anything to you? Would have been here around 2005 or earlier?" Jake's weathered face registered immediate recognition. "Sarah? Course I remember. Sarah. Worked here for, must have been 3 or 4 years. Quiet gal, kept to herself mostly, but had a way with animals like I've never seen before or since." He chuckled softly. Even the meanest bull would turn gentle around her. Had some formal training in animal husbandry, if I recall. The confirmation sent a strange thrill through Ethan. Why can't I remember her clearly? I owned the ranch then. Jake settled his lanky frame against the doorway. "You were going through a rough patch after Lisa left. Spent most of your time in Billings with the divorce lawyers and custody arrangements for Olivia. Barely set foot on the ranch that year. Left most of the hiring and day-to-day to me and your old foreman, Mike." The reminder of that painful period made Ethan wince. His marriage had collapsed suddenly, his ex-wife departing for California with declarations that she couldn't breathe in Montana anymore. The custody battle for 10-year-old Olivia had consumed him for months. What happened to Sarah? Why did she leave? Jake's expression turned somber. "She got sick, boss. Real sick, real fast. Some kind of aggressive cancer. Tried treatment for a while in Billings, but..." He trailed off, respecting Ethan's prohibition against explicit mentions of mortality. "She wasn't with us long after that." "And what's her connection to Thunder?" Ethan pressed, the central mystery still eluding him. "Thunder." Jake looked confused momentarily, then his eyes widened in understanding. "My God, that's right. You wouldn't remember because you weren't here much then. Sarah was the one who saved Thunder when he was born. His mama rejected him, wouldn't let him nurse. Gift like that usually doesn't make it, but Sarah wouldn't accept that outcome. Moved a cot into the barn, bottle-fed him every 2 hours around the clock. Even gave him that name because he was born during the biggest thunderstorm I ever saw." The pieces were beginning to fall into place, creating a picture that simultaneously made perfect sense and seemed utterly impossible. So Thunder was born here. He's not just any bull. He's literally been here his entire life. 15 years this spring, Jake confirmed. Sarah raised him from his first breath. He followed her around like a puppy those first months. Never seen anything like it. After she left, he seemed to understand she wasn't coming back. Grew into himself, became more bull-like, if you know what I mean. Still, he was always different. Watchful, like he was waiting for something. Or someone, Ethan thought, but didn't. Say, Jake, did Sarah have a child? A daughter, maybe, named Aurora? The old ranch hand's brow furrowed in concentration. Not that I recall, though there was some project she called Aurora. She mentioned it a few times, said it was going to change her life. Always figured it was a dream ranch of her own she was saving for. That evening, Ethan called Ruth Carson again, adding this new information to her search parameters. Sarah Jane Wilson worked at Whispering Pines Ranch until around 2005, and possibly something or someone named Aurora connected to her. That helps narrow things down, Ruth said. Give me another day or two. But Ethan couldn't wait. The mystery had sunk its hooks into him. There was one place he hadn't yet looked, the old bunkhouse where seasonal workers had stayed before. He renovated the staff accommodations. If Sarah had lived there, perhaps some trace of her remained. The old bunkhouse stood at the edge of the ranch compound, its wooden siding weathered to a silvery gray. Ethan hadn't been inside for years, not since converting it to storage after building the new staff quarters. The door protested with a long creak as he pushed it open, releasing the musty scent of disuse and forgotten things. Sunlight filtered through dusty windows, illuminating dancing particles in the air and casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The space was cluttered with discarded furniture, old tack, boxes of ranch paperwork deemed too unimportant to keep in the main office, but too significant to throw away. 15 years of accumulated history, stacked and forgotten. "Where do I even start?" Ethan muttered, feeling suddenly overwhelmed by the task before him. Methodically, he began working his way through the room, checking each trunk and box, finding nothing but expected ranch detritus, broken tools, outdated veterinary supplies, faded photographs of cattle from long-past auctions. After 2 hours, sweat-soaked and discouraged, he sat on an old footlocker, wiping dust from his face. His eyes drifted to the ceiling, where he noticed something unusual. One section of the overhead planks appeared slightly newer than the rest, as if it had been repaired or replaced. Standing on a rickety chair, Ethan pushed at the section, which gave way easily, revealing a small storage space between the ceiling and the roof, an improvised hiding spot. Heart racing with anticipation, he reached in and felt something solid. Carefully, he extracted a medium-sized wooden box with brass fittings, the kind that might hold personal treasures. The initials SJW were burned into the top. Sarah Jane Wilson. Ethan set the box down reverently on a cleared table, feeling like an intruder as he lifted the lid. Inside, he found a collection of items carefully preserved, several notebooks bound in leather, a small album of photographs, a sealed envelope addressed simply "For Aurora," and a velvet pouch containing a silver pendant in the shape of a bull. With his trembling fingers, he opened the first notebook. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, each entry dated. It was a journal beginning in spring 2002. First day at Whispering Pines Ranch. The mountains here make me feel small in the best possible way. This place could be a fresh start, far from Pittsburgh and all its painful memories. The foreman seems decent enough, though the owner is apparently absent, dealing with personal matters. The ranch hands are the usual mix, some friendly, some wary of the new person, especially a woman. But the animals don't judge. They see you for exactly who you are. Ethan flipped forward, scanning entries until a particular date caught his eye, March 18th, 2003. The most extraordinary thing happened today. During the midnight check of the pregnant heifers, I found one in distress. The young Black Angus we've been worried about. She was trying to deliver but struggling. I called for backup, but in the chaos of the thunderstorm no one heard. Had to manage alone. The calf was positioned wrong, but somehow I got him turned. When he finally emerged, he wasn't breathing. His mother, exhausted and confused, wanted nothing to do with him. I couldn't accept that. Not after everything. I performed CPR on a newborn calf while thunder crashed overhead. And then he breathed. He lived. I've named him Thunder for the storm that tried to claim him but failed. He's sleeping now, in a pen I've made beside my cot in the barn. I'll have to bottle feed him every 2 hours. The others think I'm crazy for trying so hard to save one calf, but they don't understand. Sometimes saving one life is like saving your own. Ethan's throat tightened. He could picture it clearly. Sarah alone in the barn during a raging storm, refusing to give up on the struggling calf that would become Thunder. The journal continued, documenting Thunder's progress. Day 5 with Thunder. He's taking the bottle well now, gaining strength. His eyes follow me everywhere I go. The ranch hands joke that he thinks I'm his mother. Maybe I am, in all the ways that matter. Week 3. Thunder recognized my voice today from across the barn and came running. Mike says he's never seen a calf so attached to a human. When I sit in his pen to read in the evenings, he rests his head in my lap like an oversized dog. Month 2. Thunder is thriving beyond all expectations. Dr. Bennett, the vet, says he's the healthiest bottle-raised calf he's ever seen. There's something special about this animal. an intelligence in his eyes that's almost unnerving. As the journal progressed, Sarah wrote less about daily ranch activities and more about her growing plan, something she called Project Aurora. Made another deposit today. The Aurora Fund is growing slowly but steadily. 2 more years at this rate, and I'll have enough for the down payment on that little property outside Bozeman. 10 acres, a small house, and most importantly, enough space for Thunder and a few rescue animals. A sanctuary, a home, our home. Ethan paused, understanding dawning. Aurora wasn't a child, it was Sarah's dream. A small animal sanctuary she was saving to build, named after the dawn that represented her new beginning. Further entries revealed her methodical planning, research into zoning laws, sketches of barn layouts, lists of equipment she would need. Thunder featured prominently in every vision of this future. Thunder follows the truck now when I drive to the far pastures. The other hands find it hilarious, this massive calf trotting after me like a faithful dog. They don't understand our connection. He was my second chance, and I was his. On the sanctuary, he'll be free to just be, not a production animal, not breeding stock, just Thunder. I've promised him this, and I intend to keep that promise. The journal entries became increasingly focused on Aurora as Sarah's plans solidified. Found the perfect property today, 10 acres outside Bozeman with a small cabin that needs work but has good bones. There's a natural spring, mature trees for shade, and rolling pasture that would be perfect for Thunder and the other animals I hope to rescue. The asking price is steep, but within reach if I continue saving at my current rate. I've named it, already in my mind, Aurora Sanctuary, where new beginnings dawn. But then, in early 2005, the tone of the entries changed dramatically. The pain in my side wouldn't go away. Finally went to the clinic in town today. They're sending me to Billings for more tests. Trying not to worry, but it's hard not to. Fear the worst. The entries became sporadic, detailing hospital visits, treatments, and growing concern about the future of her plans. The Aurora Fund will have to go to medical expenses now. The sanctuary feels like a fading dream, but I can't give up, won't give up. Thunder is depending on me. The final entry was dated just weeks before her passing. Too weak to write much. Made arrangements for the Aurora money to go into a trust. Instructions with my lawyer in Billings. When Thunder's time comes, years from now, I hope he'll be brought to rest beside me. Together in the end, as we were in the beginning. I've left the silver pendant. He'll know what it means. I couldn't give him Aurora, but perhaps someone else will one day. Someone who understands. Ethan closed the journal, emotions churning within him. He turned to the photo album next, finding images that brought Sarah Jane Wilson to life, a slender woman with auburn hair and determined green eyes, often photographed with animals. The most frequent subject was a black bull calf, growing visibly. From image to image, often with his head resting against Sarah's side or taking a bottle from her hands. The final photo showed a teenage Olivia during a summer visit to the ranch, proudly sitting on a fence while Sarah stood beside her, one hand protectively on the girl's shoulder, the other on the head of a young bull that could only be Thunder. Ethan stared in shock. His daughter had known Sarah, had interacted with her and Thunder, yet Olivia had never mentioned this connection. The sealed envelope marked "For Aurora" felt heavy in his hands. He debated whether he had the right to open it, ultimately deciding that its contents might be crucial to understanding the full story. Inside was a letter and a small key. To whoever finds this letter and understands its importance. The key, enclosed, opens a safe deposit box at First Montana Bank in Billings, box No. 413. Inside is everything related to Aurora Sanctuary, the land deed I managed to secure before my diagnosis, the architectural plans, and the trust fund I established. With what remained of my savings, It's not enough to build the sanctuary I dreamed of, but perhaps it's a start. My greatest hope is that Thunder will somehow find his way to this land, that the promise I made to him might still be kept, even if not by my hand. I know it sounds foolish to speak of promises to an animal, but anyone who has truly known Thunder will understand. He remembers, he knows. May Aurora's dawn still rise, even if I'm not there to see it. Sarah Jane Wilson. Ethan sat in stunned silence, the E.T. letter trembling in his hands. Sarah had actually purchased land for her sanctuary, had established a trust, had never given up on her dream of providing Thunder with a special home where he could live out his days in peace, not as livestock, but as a beloved companion. And all this time, Thunder had been visiting her grave, the place where the woman who had saved him, raised him, and promised him a different future now rested, the woman who had named him for the storm of his birth and dreamed of an Aurora for their shared future. The ringing of his phone startled Ethan back to the present. It was Ruth Carson. Mr. Miller, I found something interesting about Sarah Wilson. According to my records, she purchased a parcel of land just outside Bozeman in late 2004. 10 acres with a small cabin. The property was registered under the name Aurora Sanctuary, Inc. I know, Ethan said softly. I just found her journals. There's more, Ruth continued. After her passing, the property went into a trust with very specific conditions. It was to remain undeveloped until either 50 years had passed or until... Until what? Ethan prompted, when she hesitated. Until, and I quote, Thunder comes home to Aurora. Does that mean anything to you? Ethan's heart pounded. Yes, it means everything. That evening, Ethan sat in the living room with Sarah's journals spread before him, the silver bull pendant resting in his palm. Outside, a spring storm gathered, lightning occasionally illuminating the mountains in stark relief against the darkening sky. The parallel to the night of Thunder's birth wasn't lost on him. When Olivia entered, her eyes widened at the collection of items. Dad, what is all this? I think you know, Ethan replied softly, holding up the photograph of teenage Olivia with Sarah and Thunder. You knew her, didn't you? Sarah Wilson. Olivia carefully took the photo, her expression a complex mixture of surprise and long-buried emotion. I didn't think you'd remember her, she said finally. You were so absent that summer dealing with the divorce. Sarah was kind to me when I felt abandoned by both you and Mom. The words stung, but Ethan recognized their truth. Why didn't you ever mention her, especially after Thunder started his cemetery visits? Olivia sank into the armchair across from him. I barely remembered her myself until now. I was only 10, Dad, and after she was gone, no one talked about her. It was like she'd never existed. She traced a finger over the image. But I do remember she loved that bull calf. She let me help bottle feed him sometimes. Did she ever mention Aurora to you? A sanctuary she was planning to build? Olivia's brow furrowed in concentration. Maybe. I remember her talking about a special place where animals could be safe forever. I thought it was just a story to entertain a kid. She paused. Is that what all this is about? You think Thunder remembers her after all these years? That he's visiting her grave because of some connection they had? I know how it sounds, Ethan admitted, but I've watched him live. This isn't random behavior. He knows exactly where he's going and why. It's not actually that far-fetched, Olivia said thoughtfully. Studies have documented elephants returning to the remains of deceased herd members years later. Corvids hold funerals for their dead. Dolphins show signs of grief. Animals form bonds and remember them. She looked up from the photograph. I just never expected to see it in cattle. Thunder was never just cattle, Ethan replied, not to Sarah. That night, sleep eluded Ethan. He found himself drawn to the window, watching the storm rage across the valley. In the occasional flash of lightning, he could see the cattle huddled together, for warmth and protection, all except one large black shape standing apart, face raised to the tempest as if greeting an old friend. The next morning, Ethan drove to Billings with the small key and Sarah's letter. At First Montana Bank, he presented both to a skeptical manager who eventually relented after verifying Ethan's identity and consulting the trust documentation. The safe deposit box contained exactly what Sarah had described: a land deed for 10 acres outside Bozeman, architectural plans for a small animal sanctuary, and trust documents establishing the Aurora Sanctuary Foundation, with Sarah Jane Wilson as founder and trustee. What Sarah's letter hadn't mentioned was the video, a DVD in a clear plastic case labeled simply "For Thunder." Ethan stared at it, wondering what message Sarah had recorded for an animal who couldn't understand human language, yet somehow remembered her 15 years after her absence. That afternoon, Ethan drove to the address on the deed, curious to see the land that had meant so much to Sarah. The property was about 30 minutes outside Bozeman, down a winding dirt road that eventually opened to a breathtaking vista. The 10 acres sat in a small valley, sheltered by mountains on 3 sides, with a clear view of the sky to the east, perfect for watching the sunrise. A small, weathered cabin stood near a copse of aspen trees, and a natural spring fed a meandering creek. It was beautiful, peaceful in a way that immediately made sense of Sarah's dream. Ethan could envision it as she had, a sanctuary where animals could live out their days in tranquility, Thunder grazing contentedly in the meadow, Sarah watching from the cabin porch. Aurora, the dawn of something new. Back at the ranch, Ethan found Lucas Bennett, the town veterinarian, examining one of the pregnant heifers. Lucas had been serving the ranch for over 20 years. His once dark hair now completely silver, though his hands remained steady and strong. "Lucas," Ethan said after the checkup was complete, "do you remember Sarah Wilson?" The vet's expression softened immediately. "Sarah? Of course. Remarkable woman. Had a way with animals I've rarely seen before or since." He glanced toward the pasture where Thunder stood watching them. "She's the one who saved that big fellow, isn't she? Bottle raised him after that difficult birth during the thunderstorm." "That's right," Ethan confirmed. "Did you know about her plans? Aurora Sanctuary?" Lucas nodded slowly. "She consulted me about it several times, wanted my input on the medical facility she planned to build, the best layout for housing different species together." He smiled sadly. "It was a beautiful dream. She was so close to making it happen when she got sick." "The land is still there," Ethan said. "She bought it before she became ill, set up a trust to preserve it." "Are you serious?" Lucas's eyebrows shot up. "All these years, I assumed the dream died with her." "Not completely," Ethan replied, "but I need your help with something. Thunder has been visiting her grave every Sunday for weeks now. Is it possible—" He hesitated, feeling foolish. "Is it possible he actually remembers her after 15 years?" Lucas didn't laugh as Ethan had feared he might. Instead, he looked thoughtfully toward Thunder. "Cattle have better memories than most people give them credit for. They can recognize dozens of other cattle individually, remember where food is located, and certainly recognize humans who've handled them. Under normal circumstances, I'd say 15 years is pushing the limits of plausibility." "But," Ethan prompted, hearing the reservation in his tone. "But Thunder's circumstances weren't normal. The level of imprinting that happens during bottle feeding is intense, far stronger than usual bovine bonds. Sarah was his entire world during his critical developmental period. She wasn't just a caretaker, she was mother, provider, safety." Lucas rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I've seen working dogs grieve for their handlers for years, maintain attachments that seem to defy simple explanation. If any cow could maintain a 15-year memory of a human, it would be one with Thunder's history." That evening, Ethan finally watched the DVD he'd found in the safe deposit box. With hands that trembled slightly, he inserted it into the old player in his office and pressed play. Sarah's face filled the screen, thinner than in her photos, her once vibrant auburn hair dulled, but her green eyes still fierce with determination. She sat in what appeared to be a hospital room, speaking directly to the camera. I don't know. Who might be watching this? Who might have found the key, understood its importance? But if you're seeing this, you've probably met Thunder, and you've noticed something special about him. She smiled wanly. He's not just any bull, he never was. When Thunder was born, the vet gave him less than a 10% chance of survival. But sometimes 10% is enough. Sometimes, against all odds, life finds a way. He fought so hard to stay in this world, and I fought alongside him. Together, we created a miracle on a stormy Montana night. I made him a promise during those long nights, in the barn, that he would never be just a number, never be reduced to his economic value, that he would have a place where he could simply be Thunder, appreciated for his unique spirit, his gentle soul. I called that promise Aurora, the dawn of a new beginning for both of us. I thought we had time. I was so certain. Her voice broke momentarily. I've done what I can to keep my promise. The land is there, waiting. The trust has funds, not enough to build everything I dreamed of, but enough to start. Enough to give Thunder the home I promised him. I've instructed my lawyer to release these materials only when certain conditions are met. Either 50 years have passed, or someone has recognized Thunder's special nature and is actively seeking answers. If you're watching this, I believe you're the latter. Thunder remembers. I know that sounds impossible, but I've looked into his eyes every day for 2 years. There's a depth there, an understanding that transcends what we think we know about cattle consciousness. He will remember me, and he will remember the promise of Aurora. I'm asking whoever finds this, and I believe it will be someone with the heart to understand, to help me keep my promise to him. Take Thunder to Aurora. Let him live out his days in peace, on land that was meant to be his home. Let him be more than his monetary value. Let him be the miracle I know him to be. Sarah's image blurred as tears filled her eyes. And if it's not too much to ask, when his time eventually comes, many years from now, please bring him back to rest beside me. We began our journey together. We should end it together too. The video ended, leaving Ethan sitting in stunned silence as the screen went blue. A complex tangle of emotions washed over him. Grief for a woman he barely remembered, awe at the depth of connection she'd formed with Thunder, and a growing certainty about what he needed to do. Outside his window, the Montana sky had cleared after the storm, revealing a canopy of stars so bright and numerous they seemed close enough to touch. And on the eastern horizon, the faintest hint of light. Not yet dawn, but its promise. Aurora. Morning broke over Whispering Pines Ranch with a brilliance that seemed significant, the eastern sky painted in strokes of gold and pink. Ethan stood on his porch, coffee mug in hand, watching as the first rays of sunlight touched the distant mountains, then gradually spread across his land. Aurora, the dawn. He understood now why Sarah had chosen that name for her sanctuary. The ranch hands were surprised when Ethan announced a meeting after breakfast, something he rarely called unless there was a crisis or major operational change. They gathered in the main barn, sitting on hay bales or leaning against posts, eyeing their boss with curiosity. The scent of fresh hay and leather hung in the air, mingling with the earthy smell of the animals nearby. I've made a decision, Ethan began, his voice steady but filled with purpose. I'm going to honor a promise made 15 years ago by someone who once worked here, Sarah Jane Wilson. A murmur ran through the older hands who remembered her, while the newer employees exchanged confused glances. Miguel, who had only been at the ranch for 2 years, leaned toward Jake and whispered a question. The older man shushed him with a gentle gesture. Sarah saved Thunder when he was born and raised him by hand, Ethan continued, gesturing toward the pasture where the massive black bull could be seen grazing in solitude. Before she left us, she promised him a sanctuary, a place called Aurora, where he could live out his days in peace, not as livestock, but as the special being she recognized him to be. Jake nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his weathered face. That's why he visits her at the cemetery. He remembers her. Yes, Ethan confirmed, remembering the sight of the bull lying on Sarah's grave. And I've discovered she actually bought land for this sanctuary and established a trust to fund it. The property has been sitting untouched all these years, waiting for Thunder. So what exactly are you planning, boss? Asked Miguel, his dark eyes reflecting both curiosity and concern. Several other hands nodded, clearly wondering the same thing. I'm going to build Aurora Sanctuary, Ethan announced, the words feeling right as they left his mouth. Not just for Thunder, but for other animals too, the way Sarah intended. Animals that need special care, that deserve more than a production-based existence. The announcement was met with a mixture of reactions, some confused, some supportive, a few skeptical. Carlos, one of the younger hands, crossed his arms defensively. So you're turning. You're back on ranching, going all soft on us now? His tone was challenging, but Ethan recognized the fear underneath. Fear of change, of lost livelihoods. No, Carlos. This won't affect Whispering Pines operations, he assured them. The sanctuary will be a separate entity, on Sarah's land near Bozeman. I'll be looking for someone to manage it day to day. The ranch will continue as always. Relief visibly washed over several faces. Then a voice spoke from the back of the gathered group. I'll do it, Olivia said, stepping forward. Until that moment, Ethan hadn't been sure of his daughter's reaction to his plan. Her auburn hair, so similar to Sarah's in the photographs, caught the morning light streaming through the barn windows. Managing the sanctuary, I mean. My veterinary training would be useful, and I've been looking for a way to apply it beyond conventional ranch work. Ethan studied his daughter's face, seeing determination there that reminded him of Sarah in the video. For a moment, he saw the 10-year-old girl in the photograph sitting on the fence with Sarah's protective hand on her shoulder. Are you sure, Liv? It would mean dividing your time, building something from the ground up. I'm sure, she replied firmly, coming to stand beside her father. I've been searching for my place here, trying to reconcile my love for animals with the realities of ranch life. This feels right, Dad, like it was waiting for me. She paused, her voice softening. Like Sarah was waiting for me to grow up enough to understand what she tried to teach me that summer. The meeting dispersed with a buzz of conversation, the ranch hands returning to their daily tasks with a new energy. Jake lingered behind, approaching Ethan and Olivia with a thoughtful expression. His weathered hand clutched his worn cowboy hat against his chest. Sarah would be mighty pleased, the old ranch hand said quietly. Funny how things work out sometimes. All these years later, her dream finding new life through both of you. I should have seen it sooner, Ethan replied, regret coloring his voice. Thunder's behavior, the connection they shared. I was too busy seeing animals as commodities to notice what was right in front of me. Never too late to see things differently, Jake said, clapping him on the shoulder. Sarah used to say that too. Said it was like watching an aurora. Sometimes you got to look at the sky a long time before you see the colors change. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Over the following weeks, Aurora Sanctuary began to take shape. Ethan and Olivia made regular trips to the property, clearing brush, assessing the cabin's condition, and working with an architect to adapt Sarah's original plans to current needs and regulations. The trust she had established had grown modestly, over 15 years, not enough to fund the entire project, but a meaningful start that Ethan supplemented with his own investment. The cabin, abandoned for so long, revealed its secrets as they cleared years of dust and neglect. Beneath the cobwebs and faded curtains, they found touches of Sarah everywhere, bookshelves filled with veterinary manuals and ethology texts, notes scribbled in margins, sketches of barn layouts taped to walls. In one room, designed to be an office, they discovered a large bulletin board with photos of Thunder as a calf, charts tracking his growth, and a hand-drawn map of what the sanctuary could become. She had it all planned out, Olivia marveled, gently touching a faded photograph of baby Thunder taking a bottle from Sarah's hands. Every detail. Lucas Bennett, the veterinarian, became enthusiastically involved, helping design the medical facilities and offering to provide care at reduced rates. When Ethan showed him Sarah's original plans for the veterinary clinic, Lucas's eyes grew misty. "She consulted me about these specifications," he said, his finger tracing a particular detail in the blueprints. "I'd almost forgotten. She was so passionate about doing it right, creating a space that could handle anything from routine care to emergency procedures for multiple species." Word spread through the community, and soon others were volunteering time, materials, and expertise. A retired contractor offered to oversee the barn renovation. The local hardware store donated supplies. The agricultural high school proposed a program where students could intern at the sanctuary. Even Carlos, initially skeptical, arrived one Saturday with his brother who owned a landscaping business, offering to clear the overgrown paths and plant native flowers around the cabin. The project became something larger than simply fulfilling a promise to one animal. It became a community endeavor, a chance to create something meaningful that honored not just Sarah and Thunder, but a different way of relating to the animals in their care. Through it all, Thunder continued his Sunday pilgrimages to Sarah's grave, but Ethan noticed subtle changes in the bull's behavior. There was a new awareness in his gaze when Ethan approached, as if Thunder sensed that something important was happening. The massive animal would watch intently whenever Ethan or Olivia returned from their trips to Aurora, sniffing their clothing and vehicles with unusual interest. On one Sunday, Ethan followed at a respectful distance and sat quietly on a nearby bench while Thunder lay on Sarah's grave. The summer wildflowers had bloomed around the headstone. Ethan's doing, though he never mentioned it to anyone. The contrast of the vibrant colors against the weathered gray stone created a poignant tableau. "We're building Aurora," Ethan said, softly, feeling only slightly foolish for speaking to the bull. "The sanctuary she promised you. It won't be long now." Thunder turned his massive head, his dark eyes meeting Ethan's with an intensity that sent a shiver down the rancher's spine. There was a depth in that gaze that transcended what Ethan had ever recognized in an animal before. Understanding passed between man and animal, not in words, but in something deeper and more primal, a recognition of shared purpose. By late summer, the core structures of Aurora Sanctuary were complete. A renovated barn with specialized stalls for different animals, a small but modern veterinary clinic, and the restored cabin that would serve as Olivia's residence and the sanctuary's office. The 10 acres had been carefully fenced and divided into pastures and exercise areas. Solar panels provided electricity, and the natural spring had been developed into a sustainable water system that fed a small pond near the center of the property. One evening, as Ethan and Olivia stood on the cabin's newly rebuilt porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold, Olivia asked the question that had been on both their minds. "Do you think he'll know, Dad? Will Thunder recognize this place somehow?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "I don't know. By all logic, he shouldn't. He's never been here, never seen this place, and yet we've both watched him remember Sarah all these years," Olivia finished. "Remember a promise that was never spoken in words he could understand. "It's time," Ethan told her the next morning as they stood looking over the completed sanctuary. "Time to bring Thunder home." The journey was carefully planned. Thunder had never left Whispering Pines Ranch in his 15 years, and transporting a full-grown bull required preparation and patience. They decided to move him at dawn, a fitting time for his arrival at Aurora. They spent days acclimating Thunder to the trailer, placing his feed inside, allowing him to enter and exit at will with the ramp down and the doors secured open. Jake worked with him daily, his gentle old hands guiding the massive animal with quiet confidence. The silver bull pendant that Sarah had left was polished until it gleamed. The loading went more smoothly than anyone expected. Thunder, normally resistant to enclosed spaces, walked calmly up the ramp after Ethan attached Sarah's silver bull pendant to his halter. There was an almost expectant quality to his movements, as if he understood the significance of the journey. The drive to Bozeman took several hours, the trailer moving slowly to ensure Thunder's comfort and safety. Ethan drove carefully, acutely, aware of the precious cargo behind him. Olivia followed in her truck, carrying supplies and Thunder's familiar feed. Jake had wanted to come, but a flare-up of his arthritis had confined him to the ranch, though he made Ethan promise to call as soon as Thunder was settled. As they turned onto the dirt road leading to the sanctuary, the first rays of sunlight crested the eastern mountains, bathing the valley in golden light. Aurora indeed. Olivia, driving ahead in her truck, pulled to the side, her face alight with emotion as she gestured toward the view. "Dad, look. It's perfect. Like the universe arranged this moment." The sunlight spilled across the sanctuary grounds, illuminating the new barn, the restored cabin, the pond reflecting the rose-gold sky. It was, Ethan had to admit, as perfect a moment as he could have imagined. When they finally opened the trailer doors at the sanctuary, Thunder stood motionless for several long moments, sniffing the air. Then with deliberate steps, he descended and stood on Aurora soil for the first time. His head lifted, nostrils flaring as he took in his new surroundings. Ethan and Olivia watched in silence, hardly daring to breathe. What happened next would forever remain etched in Ethan's memory. Thunder began to move across the pasture, not with the cautious steps of an animal in unfamiliar territory, but with purpose, as if he recognized the land. He moved directly toward the cabin, the very building that featured in Sarah's plans and photographs, where she had imagined watching over her sanctuary. There, Thunder stopped and released a deep, resonant bellow that echoed across the valley, not a sound of distress, but of arrival, of recognition. Then he lowered his head to graze peacefully, as if he had always belonged there. "He knows," Olivia whispered, tears streaming unchecked down her face. Somehow he knows this is the place she promised him. The weeks that followed brought a steady stream of new residents to Aurora Sanctuary, a blind horse from a neglectful situation, a pair of goats rescued from slaughter, chickens from a shuttered factory farm. Each animal received individualized care, proper nutrition, and perhaps, most importantly, recognition of their unique personalities and needs. Just as Sarah had envisioned, Thunder assumed an unexpected role as the sanctuary's gentle patriarch. Despite his imposing size, he showed remarkable patience with the other animals, particularly the younger or more traumatized ones. Volunteers and visitors alike marveled at his behavior, how he would stand protectively near the blind horse during thunderstorms, how he would wait calmly while smaller animals drank from the pond before approaching himself. He learned it, and from Sarah, Jake observed during one of his frequent visits to Aurora. That patience, that gentleness, she taught him by example. As fall painted the Montana landscape in brilliant oranges and reds, Aurora Sanctuary hosted an official opening ceremony. The small gathering included those who had contributed to bringing Sarah's vision to life: ranch hands, volunteers, supporters from the community, and even Ruth Carson from the Historical Society, who brought a framed photograph of Sarah to hang in the cabin. Ethan, never comfortable with public speaking, found himself standing before the small crowd, searching for words to express what Aurora had come to mean to him. 15 years ago, he began, Sarah Jane Wilson made a promise to a newborn calf that seemed unlikely to survive the night. Against all odds, both the promise and the calf endured. For years I saw this land, and the animals on it primarily in terms of their economic value. It took a bull remembering a woman who had saved him, remembering her kindness, her care, her promise, to show me what I'd been missing. He gestured toward Thunder, grazing peacefully in the autumn sunlight. Aurora Sanctuary exists because an animal refused to forget, and because a woman refused to see animals as just livestock. Their connection transcended what we think we know about the bonds between species. It reminds all of us, that consciousness, emotion, and memory aren't uniquely human traits. They're part of a shared heritage among living beings. From that day forward, Aurora Sanctuary grew in reputation and purpose. Olivia proved to be an exceptional director, combining her veterinary knowledge with the compassion she'd glimpsed in Sarah during that long-ago summer. Under her guidance, the sanctuary developed educational programs, research opportunities, and community outreach initiatives, all centered on the principle that animals deserve to be seen as individuals, not commodities. And every Sunday, without fail, Ethan would drive to Pinecrest Cemetery with a bouquet of wildflowers. He would clean Sarah's headstone, leave the flowers, and sit for a while telling her about Thunder and the sanctuary that bore the name she had chosen. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, he could almost hear her voice on the Montana wind. Not sad, but peaceful, grateful. Thunder no longer needed to make his cemetery pilgrimages. Whatever he had sought there, recognition, remembrance, connection, he had found in the fulfillment of Sarah's promise. Yet the bond remained, honored now in the life and purpose of Aurora Sanctuary, where dawn broke each day over a place where animals were valued not for what they could produce, but for who they were. In the years that followed, whenever visitors asked about the imposing black bull who moved with such gentle dignity among the other animals, Ethan would tell them Thunder's story, not as a mystical tale or a rancher's tall tale, but as a simple truth. Love leaves traces that endure beyond absence, beyond species, beyond time. And sometimes, if we're wise enough to look, we can see those traces in the eyes of a bull who remembers, in the promise of a new dawn, in the sanctuary built on a dream that refused to fade. Beloved listeners, we hope that Thunder's journey has touched your heart and perhaps changed how you see the connection between humans and animals. The bonds we form with those we care for, human or not, can endure far longer than we might imagine. For more emotionally resonant stories that explore these profound connections, we've created a special playlist you can find by clicking to your left. If you appreciated Thunder's tale, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique narratives that explore life's complexities and unexpected beauty. We look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments section below, perhaps about a special animal that has touched your own life. Until our next story, remember that understanding can dawn like an aurora, illuminating what was always there, waiting to be seen.